are live. It is counting. So the counter is on. I'm very happy to have Alex Prasad, the CEO of V1 Sports today. Alex, thanks for coming on. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete. Good to connect with a fellow Michigander.
I got to ask, are you still in Traverse City?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Oh, man. This is the time of year because, we were talking in the pre-show. I went to Ferris State, grew up just north of Detroit, but this was the time of year, usually around, March Madness comes out and you're pretty content, even regardless of the weather outside, because there's a lot on TV to watch. You got Bay Hill was on this week and the players, and then, leading into the Masters. But this is the time of year where you're watching TV and it's warm and sunny in these places you're watching, and you're sitting and looking outside, and there can most likely still snow on the ground. Or if you do get a little warm snap of 60, 70 degrees, it's gone, and you're back to snow the next week. So I feel for you. I feel your pain.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm married to a Youper, which maybe more than half the people won't know, but that's someone from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So this is kind of the compromise in between spot from Metro Detroit or Ann Arbor, where we were. And yes, we do question your decision making. However, this time of year, I say for 6 months of the year, we're the smartest people on planet Earth. That's the summer months, because there's nothing better than a northern Michigan summer, and you're nodding your head. And for 6 months, we're the dumbest. So it's pretty stark. It's one or the other. So right now is the tail end of the you could be somewhere where it's nice the phase, but low humidity, high 70s, and sunny in August here, right?
Yep.
With the lakes and stuff, you can't beat that. So
no, it's great up there. We used to go. We called it rafting down the river, and sometimes we take the big metal ice chests they're not like a horse trough. We get one or two of us in those and go. We call it kayaking down the river in an ice trough that they now use for ice baths. That's the craze. So yeah, there are a lot of good times in northern Michigan. Summer is great.
Yeah. We'll focus on the summer and suspend disbelief for the in between.
Yeah. As we get into it, one question I got to ask you, because for anyone that's done any homework or has used a V1 system in sports, in baseball, golf in particular, they have no, and you follow the history, or anyone has used it and they followed the history and been part of it. There has been a life cycle to the product, and there was the initial, the king of the block, first one to market, and then it was great. And no one could really knock it off his perch. But then there was a little bit of a depression, and now it's made a comeback. And I got to give you and your team a lot of credit. So how long have you been there, and what led you to get into a company that might have not have had the luster that it once had?
Yeah, good question, Pete. So, boy, where to start? I mean, just the V1 story, maybe we can start there, right? Just a little more detail, right? 25 plus years old at this point. And it kind of, the first innovation was sending video over the internet before you could. It's just funny how fast technology changes, right? And now we're in this AI craze, and you can see kind of the next wave. It's almost like a second internet or something coming, right? So sending video over the internet today, and we're streaming 4K, your March Madness, 4 games at the same time in 4K on your phone, at the gas station, right? Video over the internet, big deal. But it was, right, then, just how far we've come, right? And then also V1 did a really good job historically, telestration on that video too. That was another kind of face melting innovation. The word I use is commoditized, right? But those tricks, if you will, are old tricks at this point. And so we really have to do a rethink of the products. And to your point, like life cycle, I think is a good phrase. Everything has a life cycle, I think, including technology. And so we've really tried to pivot here, and we're launching a new mobile application for the pros called V1 Coach. That's in the hands of about a dozen pros right now, and you can hear more about that in the next 6 weeks or so. But we had to do a complete, tear it down to the studs and start over. So in late summer of 21, it was a staged rollout. First, we replaced the V1 Golf app, which is that app, the student side or the athlete side app, right, for consumers. That was a complete rebuild. And we've done the same. We built on top of that, if you will, to build V1 Coach. And so now we're in a position, again, with these dozen or so coaches right now testing, instructors testing right now, where there's a kind of a coherent platform. I can talk more about that. But it's been a long life cycle, and it's very hard to keep the parallel paths going. Pete, you're from Metro Detroit. I am too. Everything is an autos analogy for me, right? But it's keeping the parts and servicing your internal combustion engine vehicles while also trying to do electric. Super hard, right? I mean, the whole industry autos
Yeah,
is
you
based
only
on
have
that
so many
modularity.
resources. Exactly.
Right. You only have so many resources. So that's kind of two parts of that equation. One is the resources to invest, and the other is generating the resources to invest, right? And so fundamentally, the business model of generating revenue primarily from charging pros is a hard one. There's only so many pros out there, instructors. Um, I'll rope you in. You're price sensitive, understandably, right? And so to deliver a kind of best in class product only by generating revenue from instructors is a really hard slog. And oh, by the way, right, invest in a whole new thing and build a whole new thing. And so that's kind of how we went to the consumer first, not from a prioritization perspective, from a technology perspective. It's easier to build a more basic thing. But also that's kind of the growth engine for us going forward. So we have the resources to invest in the full platform.
Yeah, the
and not
numbers
have
are so much bigger for the general consumer than they are for coaches. I mean, I don't remember through the PGA or even people who aren't coaches who aren't in the PGA. There's a few of them. They're very good, but it's just sheer numbers that you've got. I mean, thousands of golfers out there versus how many tens of thousands of coaches.
Right. Yeah. And we can slice it and dice it into core and avid and all those numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
still it's just math. Right. And so we've made a very conscious effort that from a strategic perspective, the revenue that we're trying to generate is primarily through the golfers, less through the instructors. And there's some fun, without getting out too far over our skis, and we gotta, get this platform up and running. I think there's some really exciting things we can do on the B2B side with pricing, et cetera, to kind of rebalance based on that realization. That's been a really hard, by the way, metamorphosis. Internally, there's a lot of debate. Not everyone kind of got their way. Our board had a kind of whole, reawakening or whatever you want to call it to see a new strategy. But I don't know. Don't want to touch any political things, whatever, but there's a phrase, right? Decline is a choice, but growth is a choice too.
Mm-hmm.
When you're running a business, and you know this from growing your various social media platforms, you're not just on the range all day, every day. You've chosen to grow, and that brings a whole different set of challenges, right? You want to squeeze out another 5% every year. It's just different, not better or worse, different. But if you choose to grow, and kind of amp up that pressure or, hit faster on the treadmill, there's new challenges that come with it, basically, right? And so that was a big change. I think
It's
treadmill was
constantly
going,
evolving or constantly changing.
yeah,
For the coaches out there, the students or the avid golfers, the diehards, the technology has shown in the swing that the path, angle, attack, all those things are constantly changing. So to put it in the context that maybe someone can understand, the business world is constantly changing and evolving as well through the use of technology. What you guys are in that sector, but the utilization of social media, and it's like, if you're a coach or you're an avid golfer, it's like, which one of these things do you use? Because they're constantly coming at you so quickly and it's ramping up even more. And if you want to spend time on the range, which is your main source of revenue as a coach, which you guys have helped tremendously, as I have seen in what you've done to the product and talked to people who use it a hell of a lot more than I do, that they're able to spend maybe a little bit more time building a YouTube channel or doing more posts on social media, which seems to be one of the criteria to get on the top 50 or top 100 list. So they're able to be a more efficient, better use of time as products like yours become more user efficient as well, at least for their lifestyle.
yeah. I mean, that's a number one. And, we'll probably hit on it at some point, right? My background is not in the golf industry, originally. I have been at this company for 3 plus, almost 4 years now. I spent a lot of time talking to golf pros. Just tell me your story, right? What keeps you up at night? What's good about your job? What's bad about your job? And yeah, I mean, time utilization, Pete. And as I'll say, recovering attorney, I mean, it's very similar. You are billing by the hour, right? And there are only so many hours in the day. And sure, you can bill 20 hours a day. You'll see how long that lasts, right? For your work-life balance and your family and all the other aspects of your life, right? It doesn't last very long, I can tell you, unfortunately, from firsthand experience. So yeah, how do you get more leverage, right, out of each hour? That's me translating what I've heard, right? But that's the number one thing. That's something we're really focused on. So, I mean, the approach that 5 thoughts based on what you just said. But the approach we've really tried to take is we're a business solution company. We happen to be in golf and we happen to be serving golf instructors, right? Just saying that, controversial, I think, internally for sure it has been,
Mm-hmm.
and externally as well. But that's the way that we frame our internal thinking. And secondly, a SaaS business, a software as a service business, it's a service that you have turned into software, right? And so we've also tried to start there. One of the first things I worked on, Pete, was getting our support to be A++. And it wasn't that the people weren't A++, it was that the processes were not A++. And we are really super proud, especially anyone who's been a V1 user knows John and Jim, who are your highest and best support guys. I mean, I went to the PGA show, every conversation at some point mentioned those two guys. They are absolutely one of our best resources. Both have been at the company almost from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
both 20 plus years. But building around system around them, if you will, so that we are responsive. That's something I think that's unique in the industry, which is, I don't want to knock any competition, but we really care about that service piece. So that's one. So if you have a problem, we're there to solve it, right? From a time utilization perspective. We can talk more about kind of product roadmap. But yeah, we're really trying
That
to
actually,
solve.
I don't
Yeah,
mean
go ahead,
to break your thought,
please.
but that actually makes a ton of sense, because if in the age that we're in, as things are being built in mass, and
Yeah,
so refrigerators, consumer products, refrigerators, televisions, things like that, golf clubs, as we're on the topic of golf, most of the things in today's world, car engines, are close enough similar as far as a consumer is concerned. I mean, you talk to an engineer, they're going to tell you, break it down and give you a million different differences. But as
sure,
far as a consumer is concerned, it's relatively very, very similar. But the customer support seems to be where people are looking at reviews and making their decision on product. Now, I'm not saying that
yeah,
all the V1 in your competition is the
yeah,
same. I'm not saying that by any means. There are different differentiators. But for what somebody's going to use, because in the tech world, you're dealing with electronics, and as you said, you're sending 4K video with lines on it and circles on it and motion across from phones to computers and everywhere else. And that becomes very, very tricky. And no matter how good your system is, there is going to be glitches in it.
sure,
Maybe Starlink, Tesla's company, but I'm sure
sure,
that they have technical issues as well. I mean, again,
yeah,
we're dealing with electronics over vast distances. But so having that great service team that can diagnose, hey, here's what you're doing. Let me work on it. I'm going to get back to you right away, and then they do it. Seems to be in today's world one of the top priorities as far as consumers are concerned.
yeah. So on both sides of the fence, right? I think our support is really good and responsive. And in fact, if you read our Apple reviews, you'll see, you know, 80% of them are about how I had an issue and the support team solved it for me very quickly, which
Mm-hmm.
is really cool. And that's like an extra good 5-star review from our perspective. So again, software as a service, we forget because there's so much software everywhere. We all have 1,000, apps on our phone, but it starts, as a service and it's made automated, right? So anyway, that was a real touchstone moment for us to lean in there and decide that's where we wanted to live. We really want to be partners with our instructors, not just to your point, offering, I don't want to say commoditized, right? But that mass produced thing. Obviously, that's what software is about, is being able to mass produce that. I mean, that's where the leverage comes from, or the margin, et cetera. Don't get me wrong, but doing kind of things the right way, with pride, and quality is super important to us. Humanizing what's maybe in a dehumanized, right, when you're using technology, sort of experience. So we started there. And yeah, to your point, I'm not afraid to say, I think you're being a better gentleman than me, but when it comes to just video analysis and trading video over the internet, that's not a unique today. Definitively not. There's a lot of different places you can go. There are some things we talk about, right, that I think we're doing things differently, which I think is interesting to pros. But starting with, we don't view it as a commoditized relationship, that pro relationship or the consumer relationship. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of users on the consumer side. Someone said that we're the most used video analysis, golf video analysis tool in the App Store. My first response was, "Are we sure about that?" And you can slice it nice in different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly top of the heap. And I think some part of that, even if you don't have a human interaction with us as a consumer, is because we are there, or at least some of the rankings, etc. So yeah, I don't want to say easy. It's simple. two very different things. But it's a simple thing to do, to show your clients that you care. It's just human. And so we've tried really hard to do that.
Yeah, I want to ask you, but just so the listeners are clear, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who might not be crystal clear, and they're chomping at the bit, hoping that what I'm hearing you say, and I think I'm correct in that, is that you have an app for V1 sports, golf, and there's the baseball side, but we'll focus on the golf, obviously,
Yeah.
golf podcast.
Yeah.
But if someone's driving in their car right now, they're going to an appointment, they're listening, and they're an avid golfer, or they're a scratch, or they're a 20, whatever their handy, whatever their level is, they can go to the App Store and download V1 and go home in their garage, and they're hitting that, and they can start video and analyzing, as poorly as they might do, their own swing, and just pay their monthly subscription or yearly subscription, and that they can self-diagnose.
Yeah. So the V1 Golf app, that's what you would search. We believe, and don't want to let the listeners in on any state secrets here, Pete, but we do have some conversations prior, right? And you had some questions there, like, hey, we might want to hit on these things. We believe that we have this saying, improvement starts here at V1, and that's really where we believe that the V1 Golf app fits into your repertoire, if you will. So look, smash factor, launch monitor data, top tracer stuff, that stuff's great. In no way am I saying it's not interesting. It's super interesting and cool. We call them whiz bangs at V1. We're the building block, the foundational piece. Anyone in any sport knows that if you're trying to achieve an athletic feat, you've got to see yourself do it, right? You got to see you do it right way, the wrong way, feel that, and then replicate it. So we believe the V1 Golf app, which is, it's a digital thing, but it should be in every golfer's bag, right? Yeah. You need to have some video analysis tool. It's foundational. It's fundamental. So that's what that golf app does. There's basically three things in the app. There is the video analysis tools, as you mentioned. We try to help teach you how to use the app. But to your point, as poorly as someone may do, but to start, right? I'll give you the use case where it makes a lot of sense. The second is there are drills from lots of different instructors, just like you would see, if you just Google this stuff, which we know everyone's doing, by the way, but that's curated. And then there are model swings. And again, the models, there's some fun to them. Sure, like what do I look like compared to Rory or Tiger or whomever, pick your person. Utility may be sketchy, but there may be elements of what those golfers do that you're trying to emulate, right? That could have value. One of the most powerful, Pete, to your points, getting utility out of it, use cases, is someone who does have an instructor, and the instructor is working with them using video analysis, right? And saying, you're coming over the top, pick your flaw, but here's a good example of you doing it. The instructor and student are trading these videos on the platform. The instructor from what will be called V1 Coach here, but their Pro Mobile or their Studio desktop software, to the student. They can see that in their locker, in their app, and then they can overlay the swing they just took on the range with the good swing that the instructor sent to them and said, hey, you did this really well this time, right? Emulate that. They can draw the same lines, again, having been coached by the instructor, stay within, right? These, you want it to be parallel, you want it to be perpendicular, whatever we're talking about. That's a really powerful use case. It's really funny is we end up occasionally in conversations with the pros about the video analysis tool competing, the do-it-yourself, if you will, tool, competing with them. I don't think that could be, further from the truth, and we try to have that conversation in a respectful way. Because I think as an instructor, and Pete, you tell me, I hear this from instructors, you want your people to practice more, not less, right? Otherwise, what are we doing? You're just going to Groundhog Day, right? Coming to you. So this augments that experience. So certainly, if you have no, I'll call it technical background or no instruction background yourself, I've never seen an instructor, there is some utility you can get out of the app because we're going to try to get you in a very fundamental, basic way, preliminary, elementary, whatever word, on that journey.
It gets
but it's
them
the best when you have someone guiding you.
It gets them to take that step to, like, if their goal is improvement and they're dedicated to that. I mean, if their goal is to sit there and just play with an app and play around with their own swing and they want to do something, okay, fine. But eventually, if their goal is to get better, they're going to succumb to the ego and say, look, if I needed surgery, I wouldn't sit in my kitchen with a steak knife. I'd go see a doctor. And and my swing needs some surgery. I tried my best. Now I'm going to go here. But at least you're giving them a tool that they can take a a step towards that.
Yeah, I love your rebel with a cause kind of concept. But that passion for learning piece is the most important. So when we sit, as if we sit around all day picking our noses, I wish, right? When we sit around thinking about how to make the app better, etc., we are focused on golfers who want to improve, right? So one of the big trends is, athleisure and apparel, but you might call it the casual golfer, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
golf entertainment, right? The top or 5 irons, top golfs, etc. If you're and some would argue about whether that person's even a golfer or not, but I'm going to assume that they're all golfers, right? I just say that tongue in cheek, really. Such people that say, "Well, they're not even a golf." Okay, they're swinging golf clubs. For me, they're a golfer. However, they don't have that desire to improve. Yeah, I think one of the best things that's happened at V1 is the confidence to say what we are and what we are not. Organizationally, and whoever gets credit for that, or the team gets credit for that, because we kind of embraced this. But yeah, we're, to your point, the play around with it app, that's not what we are. Again, I use the word whiz bangs, which is from my chief product officer, but there's not a lot of whiz bangs there. It's not about here's some cool skeleton, etc. Which, by the way, utility to that too. I'm not poo-pooing that. Don't get me wrong, right? But if you're serious about improving, this is a place to start. As you go on your journey, you may migrate, call it up market, to those more sophisticated tools because you're so dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, you're going to come back to, let me just make sure, right, the basics, the foundation is still strong. So when folks are spending thousands of dollars on those tools, to me, logically anyhow, and of course, it's a game. We always want to have fun. I understand that. Makes sense to be paying $70 a year, a much lower price point, to make sure that those foundations are covered. You're building this library of your swings over time. I was hitting it great 3 weeks ago. What's happening now? Well, let me just go look back and compare.
Yeah, let me check.
Right?
It can be an
Yeah.
easy
Knowing
thing.
your smash factor is X or Y today and X or Y previously tells you what you probably already feel and can see is that something's off, right? Versus the two performances, if you will. This is, again, another next step, foundational tool.
Yeah, I wanted to, as I jump around in this, and like I told you before, I don't. People say I don't interview anybody. I just talk to people.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
I have no formal education in how to conduct an interview or anything else. I just kind of jump in, have a curious mind, and maybe my mind jumps all over. I mean, Doug Lowry, who's from up in Toronto, has a very, very great junior academy up there. We talked about he has bad ADHD and was diagnosed late in life, but we talked about how that can be a superpower. I'd done the test. I evidently off a 16-question test, I don't have that, but my mind does jump around a lot. So why I say that is I want to get into, because you had mentioned the employees and being so good at what they do and being there a long time. And one of the first episodes I had going way back was with Randy Soma, and you being from Detroit, JCI, Johnson Controls Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
When Randy went there, they were they're $800 million a year company. When he left, they were a $20 billion a year company. And a lot of the things that he and the team implemented were, I think if I remember correctly, and he'll probably hit me upside the head if I get this wrong, because I've known him most of my life, their first meeting of their leadership team was, it's not what we're willing to do to achieve these goals that we just laid out for ourselves or the company. It's what we're not willing to do. Meaning, in the corporate world, they're not willing to cut employees just to meet numbers for Wall Street, and they're not willing to sidestep their values and their morals and all the things that they put forward in place, which was done first. And I'm not saying that that's exactly for you, but as a CEO of a company who has made a very, very strong comeback, if I can use that term, because in my opinion, I think you guys have. What do you do as far as leadership? Because leadership, as far as I'm concerned, you need two things. You need trust, and you need followers. You don't get one without the other. So how do you keep the North Star as the vision for what the company has set out for itself? And how do you keep them focused on that? But how do you keep their trust when things get sometimes very difficult?
Yeah, I mean, those are good questions. There's been, we've had our challenges for sure. Again, as some listeners may know, we raised a significant amount of money a couple of years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big, someone pushed faster on the treadmill, right? And there's a lot of expectations that came with that. I won't judge whether we met them or not. I think we're on the right path to meeting them. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that as we get further along, because that's a very interesting investment group that you have.
Yeah. I don't know, Pete. No one knows how to be a leader. That's my response. It's hard. It's got to lead by example. I mean, I think it starts there. As we raised that money, we had the opportunity to bring in new people. I'm going to say better fit for those new goals, not better. Period. Huge difference, by the way. Mm-hmm. Right. I think people really do want leadership. They want someone to chart a course, and to bring them confidence and tell them earnestly, by the way, not talking outside your mouth, that they're the right people. So you mentioned a bunch of different things. I mean, one is core values. We have core values. We are super intolerant of violations of the core values. It's just very simple. Things like radical candor. We're not going to blow smoke at each other. We're going to be honest. Even if we disagree, that's fine. We'll note it and move on. But we don't leave meetings. We banned the use of the shruggy emoji. So you can use the shruggy emoji. I did anyhow, or and we've stuck to this. If you're inclined to use the shruggy emoji on something that we control, right? Well, this is what this person said. Like, I don't know, right? That's a red flag. I mean, that's like, I'm going to jump in, right? Let's solve this problem, right? It's regarding an external party, we don't control them. That's different. That might be explanatory, but we do not use that emoji anymore internally. And if we are, we think that we're going to, we stop in our tracks.
Yeah, you got to find the answer. Right. You don't have the luxury of not knowing the answer anymore.
Right. Yeah. So that's one thing. Intolerance makes it sound mean, but as the company evolves and grows and the expectations change, this radical candor is another of our core values. Not everyone's the right person for every stage of the company. When the company is running at different speeds or going in different directions, the needs change. I talk a lot internally about there's a point at which I'm not the right person for this job because we've hit a certain inflection point. I actually think I can kind of see that, by the way, different story, but I can see where that inflection point is. If the platform strategy we'll discuss more, et cetera, really takes off, I think you want someone to lead the company that has done it before or seen a parallel, story. And that's not me. I maybe had the vision enough to get it, to set it on the course and get it to there. And that'll be a happy conversation, by the way. That'd be a mission accomplished for me. So those are two core values. I'm really fortunate that the team that we have really likes each other. That has not always been the case. And in a larger, we got 30-ish people. It's not always true. They trust each other. That's one of our core values is trust. You have to trust that other people are given their best. If you suspect not, that leads down a lot of, kind of bad holes, bad, rabbit holes, if you will, right? After that, nothing good comes. And, it's kind of a funny thing. The radical candor thing is really important because people don't like to talk about negative things, just as a general rule.
Oh, it becomes an anchor.
Yeah. An example, I got just over 3-year-old and a 7-month-old. It's really hard. No one wants to talk about having young kids being really hard. It's really hard. I love my kids. Both can be true, right? This is an example of something that no one ever, it's a baby, it's crying. Like, yeah, no one's sleeping and it cries a lot. Like, it's really hard. Again, worth it. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand. But same with, growing a company and kind of being honest about those things. So when things go wrong, you can't have an after-action report, if you will, to use a military term, right? Or a post-mortem report, to use a medical term, without admitting that something happened that could have been better in the first place, right?
You got to have
a real catalyst. Yeah.
You got to be willing to have difficult conversations in every facet of life, at least is my opinion, or else if you were already good at it, it wouldn't be a difficult conversation. You know what to do. So whether it's with a spouse or a child or someone in your team or in your company, or somebody who's just shrugging, I don't know. Well, it will be somewhat of a difficult conversation, but it seems like you have developed a culture or enhanced the culture that might have been there as far as an advanced technological company in the sporting sector that attracts people who are good at certain segments of that sector. And when it comes to that, I have no idea. I'm a complete fool when it comes to technology as far as the inner workings or the behind the scenes. But if you're attracting people who are looking to improve on something and they want to shine at what they're portion of that sector
Sure.
is, and they're given an opportunity to do so. Even though you might not be able to sit down and write an outline or a description or a book on what leadership is, it sounds to me, or at least it's illustrated to me, and that the success of the company is you do have the leadership qualities, or else the company wouldn't be achieving what it is. Having difficult conversation, doing difficult things first and foremost, not allowing people to just take the easy route. Hey, this isn't what our core values are. We're going to do these things. If it's difficult, we'll persevere through it. And I will give you the help to achieve and do what you're good at, and you get it done.
Yeah. So I'm a big stoic, Pete. And literally on my desk here, it's a little medallion. The obstacle is the way. You probably can't see it, right?
The book.
But the impediment
I'm sure
to
you
action,
read the book as well.
Yes, of course. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And fundamentally, we've tried to bring people who believe that. Every single person that's come to this company in the last few years has been asked. I'm always kind of last stop on the train for hires. The decision's basically already been made. And I'm only a veto, basically, at that point, because I trust the team. And again, the core values, I think, are set well. And I just ask, do you want a challenge? And every applicant always says, yes, of course, I want a challenge. I go, no. Do you want to be thinking about this when you're brushing your teeth and when you're in the shower? And do you want to kind of like get upset when you're at the obstacle, right, or the challenge? Because we're trying to do something difficult in balancing the needs of the pro and the consumer, and what happens when it's a pro's, athlete. Those are really hard things that we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, and by the way, I fantasize every day about not doing the hard things and just, wanting to grow at 3% and doing the easy thing and punching the clock.
I think David Goggins would be proud of you. You're doing the difficult things on a daily basis.
But yeah, growth, again, fundamentally, this team and this group believes that growth is worthwhile and that we're growing from the experience. And I always say, I want to keep doing this as long as I feel like I'm learning and growing. And I think that's true. I mean, I also say, I think I've learned and grown more than I ever wanted to when I said yes initially, because that can be, again, because it's hard, but hard things are worth doing. Or at least that's what we believe. And so we're trying to do those things, to the best of our abilities. But yeah, it's hard to, there's a chicken and the egg thing on the core value front, right? You can't just decree them. It's just not the way it works, right? They kind of come by consensus over time through a group of people. It's hard to articulate them, but once they are there and the place is a culture, I made kind of a veiled reference to this, but allowing people, we also, ownership mentality is one of our, core values as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of intersects with the trust part. But we have the people in place where it's unique. I had an interesting conversation with a guy up here in northern Michigan, right? It's a rural place. He's talking about he can't get any, labor's a problem, right? He can't get good help, so on and so forth.
Right.
I said, well, I'm lucky because I can recruit remotely. So I see those trends agree in a macro sense, but also my pool is basically, do you have internet? Anywhere in the world, do you have internet, right? So it's a little bit easier. I said, well, how do you know people are doing their jobs? I said, you know what? I can't imagine in a company of 100 or 1,000 people, I don't think you can. But in a company of 30 people, I know all these people. I know their families. They know me. They know about my kids, etc. There's a trust there. I have lost zero sleep on are people doing their jobs because I think we have the right people. Jim Collins, right people on the bus first, then figure out where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a lot of truth, I think, to that. You just get people that are grinding and working hard and have an ownership mentality and aren't just gonna, turn the thing, the computer off at 4:59, right, and say you need to worry about this problem. It solves a lot of. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee of success. We share that thought.
I first learned about that when reading Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. The history of Apple. Yep. And how the beacon was always to be the go against the grain on everything and create things that are great products, as he used to always say. And then I read Ed Catmull's book on Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
And it went over all their culture, and it seems to be a repetitive common denominator, that it's the culture and the people that you hire. If you can get through the difficult times, as you said, you get the right people on the bus, and it will take you where you need to be. Uh, but what I see is, or let me back up a little bit. Along with that is there's a very distinct direction once that is established on what the company stands for. That's usually the first thing: what it stands for, what it is, what it represents. Like I always said, people buy what the logo represents. They don't necessarily buy the product. Harley Davidson people are going to be rebellious. That they just want to be that
Sure.
cool, go against the grain.
Yeah.
Hey, we're anti whatever it is, even if they're
Yep.
doctors, lawyers, etc. But developing the culture and hiring the right people is such vital importance. I'm always curious when I get somebody who's owned or runs a company to talk to them about that, because again, it seems to be the common denominator. And when you talk to companies who might be fledgling, or talk to a lot of different people running either entrepreneurs or small businesses or even some large businesses, and they say, you talk to a lot of people, what do you think about this? If we're playing golf or I'm giving them a lesson, and I say, well, what does your company represent? What if I look at your logo, what do you want somebody to think? And then
Yep.
do you hire people that match that direction? In that could be their fundamental, but I mean, they could be great at individual things, but do they all have that same desire? As you said, are you waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and worrying about, do you have the code right so that it is effective for consumer and for golf coach? Or
Yeah.
is there going to be a glitch in there further down the line? Is that keeping you up at night? And you fall right in line. I mean, I'm not trying to say V1 is Apple or V1 is Pixar. I mean, those are
That'd be
billion
great.
dollar companies.
Right.
But again, it's a common denominator that you see repetitively with successful entities at every single level.
Yeah, the scalability. I mean, Steve Jobs. Gee whiz. Steve Jobs is interesting. I read the same book. I don't know if you read the Elon Musk, Walter Isaacson. That was pretty interesting too. But there is such a gap, and I think Steve Jobs, maybe he wouldn't admit. I don't know. He has an interesting personality, right? He had the vision, but the execution piece, I think, is the part where people, and that's where the culture kind of kicks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say easy, but it's pretty, but it is. It may be simple and easy, right? They get conflated at that point again, right? It's fairly simple to sit here and look at so my office building, Pete, the bay is behind me. I have the parking lot view. I don't have the water view, but I wish I had the water view. The parking lot view, it's pretty simple to sit here and say, there's traffic on M72. If the cars could fly, we should just have flying cars, and they wouldn't have a traffic problem. Great vision. How do you execute on that, right?
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of people who mistake maybe not the right word, but mistake the vision piece for being sufficient. And it's not. It's that nitty gritty. Well, do we need an FAA for flying cars, right? How do you handle traffic? What if you're traversing the same route? I mean, there's complication there, right?
Yeah, what are you going to do about the birds?
Right,
How are you going to navigate birds?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of those things. And so really the balance is to get the right people that can have conversations like that. Increasingly, because we can, tie our shoes and get out the door in the morning as an organization, I can spend more time doing the vision stuff. But I can tell you, it's actually more frustrating because I'll get a vision, or the team will come up with a vision collectively, and then the team's not objecting, but they're saying, well, but here are the things that we need to think about, or the hurdles to get to. I'm sure you deal with this with your, with your students all the time, right? With your athletes.
Yeah.
You're so
How much
close.
time
If you
do they
only
have?
did X, Y, Z, you could get there, and for whatever reason, they can't do X, Y, Z. So the
Well, I'll
vision
ask
piece is
them.
super important. But yeah,
They'll come to me and say, well, I'm a 12 handicap. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, I want to get to scratch. All right, how much time do you have to dedicate to this? Are you going to go out 3 days a week and practice indoor play? Are you going to touch a club outdoors with serious practice, even if for as little as 30 minutes to 60 minutes? Well, no, I can dedicate 1, maybe 2 days a week. Okay, well, your time frame of getting to scratch by August is not going to happen, or the chance of it happening are extremely, extremely rare.
yeah,
Well, I have work, I have kids. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that playing 1 day a week, you're not going to get to scratch from a 10 or 12.
Well, that candor that we can, jive on that. There are very few people, especially in, I'll call it, professional services relationship, when they have a client that comes in that says, I want the moon and the stars, that, to your credit, will tell them, I'm not going to get there the way that you just described, right? Or within these limitations. Here's what's a reasonable expectation, right? That's, my lawyer experience, your, coaching experience. But same. You get a lot of people, right? They come to you, say, this is what I want to do, and here's how I'm going to do it. Well, let me just tell you a story about the thousands of times I've seen this movie, right? It's pretty rare. I mean, I'm not saying you
Yeah.
can't, right? But like my professional experience is that, right? Because a lot of
You
people
might
won't
be one
do
in a
that,
million.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of people won't have that conversation. And if you don't, then we're all kind of acting, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the number one thing. Do you really believe this is going to work? Yes or no, whatever it is. And if the answer is no, why are you doing it? I mean, just to go through the motions. That's the sort of stuff that we really try. I talk about intolerance, but try to beat out of ourselves, if you will. Right? Is don't go down
Yeah.
the
And
path. If you think I'm going down a path as a CEO or a vision, and you think it's just crazy, stop me. I ask 10 times a day, Pete. Is that crazy? Do you think I'm crazy? Is there something to this? Because if there isn't, stop me, right? Because I can't be all places at all times. And to your earlier point, you're the expert here. You're thinking about this particular aspect of business more than me. Stop me, or modify it, or mold it so you don't start going in a direction. So it's the same with your students. It's the same in a lot of contexts, right? But you have to have that trust and that candor to be open to the feedback that no, yeah, you're actually completely crazy. You should
and I,
stop.
and for any coach or golfer out there that might be saying, well, what the hell how does this pertain to me? I was in this position before I started. For me, the credit fallout of 07, 08, not that I saw it as an opportunity to get really educated on a lot of different things, but I just said, okay, there's not a whole hell of a lot to do. Let me read as much as I possibly can, or let me watch these videos, let me watch these lectures, let me watch this and do that. And I didn't set out to try to learn something. It was just a necessity because there was an abundance. I was very wealthy in time, very poor in finances, but I'm okay. There's nothing I can do about this. I can do this. But and what I'm saying is I was that golf pro and that coach that said, well, this doesn't really relate to me, but absolutely it relates to somebody. And especially as a coach, because what you put out there and how you put it out there and the tools you utilize, V1 being one of them, and all these other things, if you illustrate to students that you are on the cutting edge of using the greatest things to improve their game, which is why they're coming to you and to help them reach their goals, they're going to view you as somebody who's cutting edge. And anytime something else comes out, their first resource on whether that's good or not is going to be you. And the shining example I'll use as far as a culture of a coach is George Gankis. I mean, George has it is his culture. He owns it. It's the West Coast lingo. And I'm not saying, I actually think it's pretty cool. I might not agree with all of it,
Sure.
but he has a segment of people who will follow him no matter what. And he's good with that. That's his culture. Does he want to teach a buttoned up striped tie CEO from the Northeast? Probably not going to work very well, but there's other coaches for that. But whether George knew it or not, he developed that culture and he sticks to it and he doesn't deviate. He knows who he is. And so that's kind of my purpose for asking you, because again, as somebody who's taken a company that was in somewhat of a decline and completely rerouted it to double sales over the course of your tenure there, or in a shorter amount of time than that, or put the pieces in place and then it doubled. That's one thing I want to pick your brain on, at least to get it out to some of those. If the older ones aren't going to say, what they're talking about is all BS, but the younger ones will say, hey, I'm young, I got the energy. Maybe if I did this, let me see how it works. And then they start to pay attention to their branding as much as the way they act and what they employ to help their students.
Yeah, I think, yeah, boy, every question you ask, Pete, there's, five things that come from it. One is all I do all day is talk to people. I do nothing. The team actually does the work. So starting from that perspective, I haven't done anything. It's about setting the conditions for success. But one of the things that I think, if you're honest with yourself, it's a common theme of being intellectually honest, even internally, right? You realize is you can't control whether you're going to be successful or not. As a leader, you can only control the conditions and try to control for those, much culture, etc., and then hope, which is not a strategy, but it's the only strategy that you got, that it takes, right? So that's one thing. And the second is, I think one of the most interesting things to me, in any, whether it's coaching, I'm a really big runner, right? But any of these things, is it matters globally in the world, your personal relationships. It matters very little what you think and a lot more what other people think. Not that you're trying to be a people pleaser, don't get me wrong, but the things that are going to be the levers that change the future are, I don't say convincing, but understanding the motivations of other people, getting into their shoes, the people that surround you. I think one of my big critiques in the people at V1, they listen to this, they'll roll their eyes, whatever. I would say, stop pointing to the thing that we have on the shelf and saying, hey, let me tell you about this thing. Start thinking about the person you're talking to and what motivates them and what their problems are. A business would say value proposition. Great, it's a start, but the value proposition has to be based on what the other people are experiencing, what pains they have, and what are
Yeah, a
their
lot of
biggest hopes and
open-ended
dreams.
questions.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the most important thing, is spending time in the other person's shoes, your counterparty in a partnership, your adversary. I get on the phone, with lots of different potential partners, etc., all the time, and I say, if you had a magic wand, it's my favorite question. What happens, right? What's the number one thing that you're after absent a relationship with me or with us? And then, as you imagine what it could be with us, what would be the biggest win for you? And I know what our goals are. It's recurring revenue and so on and so forth, but it's not important for the counterparty, if you will, lawyer
Mm-hmm.
phrase, right? But, for the partner to know that their vision should be separate, right, from any sort of relationship with me. So that's really how we try to design this new platform. It's how we try to approach everything with the support stuff we talked about. Is again, what we want, we'll get more of what we want secondarily or as a byproduct of truly understanding. So the folks that come to you, right, who are coming one off, right? They just want to get better for the tournament they're playing or their business outing, right? They come to you the
Yeah,
day
the member
before.
guest coming up next month,
Yeah,
the
right.
city championship, whatever they're playing in.
That's a different persona than the person who's going to come, 3 times a year or committed to improving, etc. And so I imagine you're going to coach them differently, right? There's a different
Mm-hmm.
time horizon, there's different goals. But to do, you mentioned George, but even he is going to modulate or change to some extent based on the individual in front of him. Obviously, yeah, he has a brand, etc. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered any of the question that you asked, but
Yeah,
that's such an important part. It's the most important part. It's
yeah,
90% of
it's
the
the first
equation.
step.
Yeah.
Whether a coach, and again, I don't think if he did, he's extremely smart. If he realized that that's what he does, I don't think he did just by. And I don't know George at all. I don't even really know anyone who knows him. But um, it for him, it came out in his videos, and maybe the person who's doing his videos want folk or made that shine. But he knows his culture, and what I'm getting at, and why I'm using George as an example very positively. So anyone out there that listens to this and says, well, you tore down George. No, I think the world of the guy. I think he's very, very good at what he does. And I think, again, he does not deviate and knows exactly who he is. But I think that's the very first step, whether you're a coach, whether you're an assistant coach, whether you're a country club, whether you're a company, entrepreneur, Fortune 50, whatever, that you have to know who and what you are, because that is going to attract like-minded customers, individuals, students, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, if
Authenticity.
you can't identify that, then you're missing the very first step in anything that has to do with business.
Yeah, if you just think about people that you like and you want to spend more time with, in general, you believe they're authentic, they're not putting on a front, they're being true to who they are. Even if you don't love that, at least they're showing their
Yeah,
true
you don't have to
selves
worry
to
about
you.
them stabbing in the back.
Right. And people want to know that you care, or maybe another is fundamentally in any sort of relationship, right? That you're really kind of invested. I think the authenticity piece fits nicely with when we're talking about core values. It's any sort of negative conversation is hard as a general principle. But if you're being authentic and you have been authentic through an entire course of a relationship and expectations were set at the beginning or core values were set for, and there's a deviation, again, not easier, but definitely simpler to say those things were, fixed, right, over time. And there's a mismatch. It's a mismatch against the authentic piece, or right. That makes it a modicum easier, a tiny, tiny bit
exactly.
easier than than not having those be fluid, right? Yeah. Just sorry from the point of like being in other people's shoes. Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the software for just a moment and where we're
Sure.
going, Pete. when we started to build the new thing, so it's going to be called V1 Coach, or it is called V1 Coach. It's in the hands of about 10 or so pros right now, and we'll be rolling it out over the next 6 to 8 weeks. Well, depending on when this is published. So, over the course of April and May, basically, of 2024, right? We just listened a lot. That's how we built the product. Hey, people that are using it now, what do you like? What do you not like, right? We have over 90% retention, 90, of our pros, many years in a row now. So we're very cognizant that that's a thumbs up, right? I mean, what we're doing is working from that the currently existing. So we want to move it to a new era and provide more value, but be very cognizant of 90+% retention is pretty stinking good. So time, we talked about leveraging time a little bit, but we're really trying to provide tools that are going to make a pro more efficient with their time, kind of through two angles. One is customizing the experience that a golfer has when they're connected to a pro. So just, Pete, I come to see you once, in South Carolina. When you invite me to the app, when I book a lesson, or when you see me in person and you're sending me videos, I'll accept an invitation from you and I'll receive a customized experience. You'll set that up with V1 ahead of time and say, right, every 3 months, I want to send this message to these golfers, or a week after I send a lesson, I want programmatic, right? But it's a customized experience. We're working on even deeper features, but we potentially color changes, so on and so forth. Again, so it feels like the golfer in the golf app is in the Pete app, if you will, or the Golf Paradigm app, Golf 360 app. Yeah. But also working on some early stage AI tools to personalize those things as well. So look, you became a golf instructor, even though you're doing it, not to be a marketer, not to build a social platform, right? I think in your perfect world, if magically you get the growth that you wanted, you do your instruction, right? That's where the passion is. It's the golf, right, part of the business. So we're trying to provide some tools, again, from listening to pros to hear their complaints about the quote unquote ghost or one time, hearing about, I don't have enough time. I'm doing, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours of lessons a day at peak season. I don't got time to think about following up with some guy. So then in February, he's sending me online videos so I can still be making a living, right, in the low tide moments. So really, again, building off of the listening, how it manifests itself is in this product. We have these chat functions, we have these customization functions. Again, we think that's unique in that we're focusing on those huge pain points for the pros and solving their business problem. Again, there's a lot of cool technology that's out there, and it has value, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's solving, a top 10 or top 5 pain point, if you will, for an instructor. And that's really where we're trying to focus to this point of stepping into someone else's shoes.
How do you, that's part of it, but how do you take the resources that you have on time, employees, and even the finances for it, to continue to develop things that you might have ideas for, or someone on the team or the company has ideas for, that maybe they see in doing these questionnaires or talking to coaches to solve problems that the coaches don't even know that they have yet, as far as what you have in the technology and what they're working on, what they want to see happen. And then you're coming up with solutions maybe that are 6, 12, 18 months down the line. And you can go back to them and say, hey, look, we think that you might be experiencing this. Here's what we're doing within our system to improve upon that. Or we have this new technique or this new whatever that's going to allow you to bypass that problem in the future. That's really, it's going to let you do more if you want to.
Yeah. Again, calling back to our Detroit roots, right? That's the Henry Ford quote. If I'd ask people what they wanted, they'd say faster horses, yes. Right? Or the paraphrase, right? Not a car. I think that's the fun of it, and that's the scary part of any entrepreneurial experience. And that's the challenge, is you can look at all the data you want. Super important. That's what grounds you in reality, right? Oh man, everyone's churning. Why? Well, you better. But the data only tells you where to look. It's the anecdotes and the human touch that really start to, I'll say, predict the future. That sounds really futuristic, right? But that's your guideposts, or your, blazing a trail, or I think it's a left at this fork, not right, but it's a thing, it's a bet, right? So one of the things we started doing, looking at the calendar, maybe 6 months ago now, maybe less, we started using a transcription service called Tactic for all of our interactions with people outside and some inside to the organization. And we can summarize those transcripts. And so now when a customer health or support person has a conversation with a pro, we get a summary of that. And they'll flag for us, automatically dumped into Slack channel, blah, blah, who cares? But that sentiment, there'll be a conversation amongst the team. We can read the summary in 1 minute of an hour-long interaction. And the employee who had the conversation might say, this part was interesting, or that part was interesting, or here was the main gist. And people ask follow-up questions. Oh, they said they really don't like that? I've never heard that before. Why did they say, right? And there's a real, maybe that's taking the anecdotal and making it data. I don't know. But it's the anecdotes. It's talking to these folks and putting ourselves in their shoes. And then we ask the question, am I crazy, a lot externally as well? Right now, we have about a dozen or so pros using the new thing, V1 Coach, the new pro mobile software. Pro Mobile was the name of the existing version today. It will become V1 Coach. And at the PGA show, I had 2 different presentations. I met with over a dozen pros. And it was, am I crazy? We hadn't built all this stuff yet. It was like, tell me about your business. Use the name of Claude Brousseau on Maui, Andre in Toronto, all these different folks, right, that we met with. Carl Alexander at Club of Purchase. Here's where we're going. What do you think? Beyond, please. I want negative feedback too, right? Is this crazy? What do you like? What do you not like about the existing stuff? Far and away, support always came up as, I like that I call, I get an answer, and you get back to me. That was, the first sentiment for sure. And then, this seems to be right path. Anyway, so again, I hope I answered the question. You spun me up and I went in a direction, but there's a huge gap. They're all leaps of faith, right? But again, you can, even 5, 6, 7 conversations, if you start having the same conversation a half dozen times, that's enough to know that you're going.
There's something there.
Right. There's something there. And, there could be self-selection error. You could only be talking to people that are like a certain customer type or whatever. But even that is enough momentum to have some, we'll look at the data first. Does anything indicate that this direction would be, what's the upside, what's the downside, right? And then secondarily, from a sentiment perspective, are we on the right track? And allocating resources is really hard. Sorry, to one of your, other questions. We want to both be faithful to people who are happy where they are. Again, 90+% retention, I don't say scares us, right? It's a good thing. But as we talk about moving to the future, right? Clearly there's some resistance to change, in not a negative way, right? Because
you got to figure out how much to continue taking care of those that are doing great work, and then how much do you allocate towards, hey, we all agree on this is a great idea, but maybe we might not be getting the compensation next year if we go down this path. Here's what we're all considering doing. Everyone's going to kind of look at each other and say, well, do we give up a little bit of CPI salary increase, or do we all jump in and say, we really all think that this is going to revolutionize some things, and that's what we're about, getting back to the culture of a company.
I mean, everyone at V1 is working for less, I think, than their full market value, because they believe that they're learning and growing. So implicitly, that has been underlying everything. And of the 30 people that we have today, I think the average tenure is maybe 2.5 years. We have some of those longtime employees at core, but there was a lot of turnover, which is not a negative thing to say about those who left. It's the place changed, the expectations changed, the culture changed. And I really do believe there's a place for everyone where they're the right fit. Trying to grow as fast as possible, we're completely rethinking things. Place is not for everyone. It's not a negative thing. I would not do well working at Ford or GM. It's not the pace I want to move at, etc. It's too big. It's bureaucratic. It's just not for me. And again,
Takes a long time to move a ship that big.
right. Yeah, right. I want to see the results sooner. Maybe I'm too impatient. So yeah, so to that point, there may be some of your listeners are, oh no, the new thing I really like Pro Mobile. I want to be. This goes back to the listening. We're not shoving anyone with two hands, in a direction anytime soon. There will be a time where we say it is untenable, right, to have these parallel paths and be supporting. And there is, just like any piece of software, right, a drawdown of the old thing because you're working more and more on the new thing. But it's bridging that gap. And to your point, being respectful. I mean, we know, again, this is springtime, as we discussed at the outset, for us. And so for most, high tide is coming, right? The water's rushing in right now.
Everyone's wanting to get out.
Right. Busier and busier and busier. And then we know October 1st, the lights go off, right? I mean, we see a real decline in usage on both the pro side and the consumer side. So we are mindful of that seasonality, those cycles. So any decisions that we make, again, from this perspective of put yourself in someone else's shoes, has that in mind. So the earliest that anyone would be forced to do anything would be, this upcoming off season. And I don't think it's even then, but there's going to be a cadence here, right? And a drum beat. So there will be change. And everyone likes change, or sometimes you like it.
Well, you guys had some pretty serious change a few years ago, I think, where you went from, what was it, 6 code bases down to like 1. You had things going so many different directions. It was, I would have to imagine that when you got 6 things going on, and it's hard to manage that financially, employee wise, and then how streamlined or efficient it is to the end consumer compared to having just 1.
Yes. Yeah. And we're not at 1. I wish we were at 1, and it was probably more than 6, but we're somewhere between, 10 and 1, closer to 1 than 10. Yeah. I think that kind of comes down to some of the leadership decisions. Is you have to place some bets, and, placing, 50 chips on red and 50 chips on black doesn't really work.
Not gonna get you anywhere.
You get nowhere. And so you have to, and 65-35 doesn't really work too well either. And so you got to get to close to 100-0 as you can.
Yeah, what's Tony Robbins say? If you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats.
Yeah, right, sure. So yeah, some of those decisions were made for us with technology, and some of the change we're talking about is regulatory. It's data privacy. We're having a chat about some of those issues pre-show. So it's not all just change that we're affecting. It's recognition of where we need to go. But yeah, those things are hard. We talked about fantasizing 3% growth, whatever. But I think every day about starting fresh and new, and the challenges that come with that, versus turning a thing around or reimagining it, and the challenges that come with that. Grass is always greener, obviously. We're very lucky to be able to work with the resource of these pros that have been with us for years and years, right? And the hundreds of thousands of golfers. We've helped grow that number, but it didn't start at 0 when this kind of team came together. So there's a software joke. I don't know if it will land, but how did God build the world in 7 days? He didn't have an install base. And so, I mean, that's part of it, right? Same, I'm sure, for you with a golfer who's gotten a bunch of instruction, thinks they have all the answers, versus someone who comes to you as a blank slate, right? There's some obstacles you have to overcome, maybe some minds that you have to change.
Well, the ones that come with all the answers, I finally get to a point. I'll let them go, and then I'll finally ask them. I say, if you knew all the answers, then what are you doing here?
Yeah, right.
And that kind of changes their mindset right away. That's why I understand, the app of somebody using the app by themselves. Many years ago, I used to think, well, that's just going to screw them up more, which it usually does, but it does lead to them seeking out some help on how to fix that or improve.
Yeah. Again, that latent desire to improve is the condition required, right? To really get the most out of it, and I'm sure to get the most out of your services too.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have it, I used to sell running shoes. This is my first job. You get some people that would come in. We call them soul suckers. It felt like someone was making them be there. Like they weren't in it. Like they were going to buy a pair of shoes, but they didn't really want to run. I didn't really want to buy it. It's almost like someone was making them buy the pair of shoes, right? That's kind of like, that's just the worst, right? Like you're not into it. I'm not into it because you're not into it. What are we even doing here, right? So again, that desire, if we're talking about an improvement tool, right? You got to have the desire to improve as a starting point. We're really just not trying to, speak to that part of the audience that's, I don't say too casual for our tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really one of the most exciting things is in consolidating these code bases, etc. I say there's kind of 3 stages with our relationship with pros. The first is to optimize your relationship, from a time perspective, etc., with your existing students. Make it way easier to communicate with them with the chat. Make it way easier for you to monetize online lessons with them, so on and so forth. That's step 1. Step 2 is to help you capture more. Many pros are teaching at a location that we call them a high volume location, where maybe
Mm-hmm.
only 5% of the people that are coming to a driving range, etc., even know there's instruction. We're trying to help cross-pollinate, if you will. But the third step and the holy grail, what we're really striving towards, is these hundreds of thousands of golfers. We're adding, on a weekly basis, depending on the time of year, but 3,000 new, we call them new registered users, but new golfers coming into the app every week. It's a lot of new golfers coming into the
It's
app
a lot of people.
who, if you got the app, we're going to bet that you have that desire to improve. It's, again, I call the holy grail. It's kind of that phase 3, which we're striving towards, but is on all sorts of different data that we have on these golfers, introducing them to pros and stimulating that demand for pros. It only makes sense if we can make the pro more efficient, because as we hear from many of our pros, I'm too busy already, right? So you have to do
Mm-hmm.
both those things. But that's where the consumer side of the business, which can stand alone, and the pro side of the business, which can stand alone, can really come together, where the growth on the one side really helps the other, and vice versa. Our pitch to a golfer saying, come here, fundamental tools, right? Fundamental content. And if you're interested, raise your hand. We'll send you to a pro, right? That you can do that remotely. It doesn't matter if you're in South Carolina or Michigan or wherever, right? It's a starting point. That's a powerful pitch to the golfers. I think it's a powerful pitch to the pros as well. So we're excited to be working towards that. Certainly not all there, ready to rock and roll
But
today.
the one thing I would say to the pros, and I was obviously a big Tim Ferriss fan. I think I got his book in
Yeah.
2011, so it was 2 years old, The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
And I read that and I couldn't sleep for 2 days. My brain would not stop. But as far as I get, I hear it all the time. The pros, oh, we're so busy. I'm like, golf pros are about the least busy people. Now, I'm not saying coaches, because some coaches, as you said, are out on a lesson tee for 8, 10, 11 hours a day, especially in seasons. Yes, that is very busy. But for some of the assistants who are behind a counter and they're kind of twiddling their thumbs for half the day, a member comes in, wants to order a new pair of shoes, or they got someone coming in, I need this tea time. And I say that because I was there and I used to say that I was busy. So I'm not chastising somebody without experiencing myself. But in large part, a lot of assistants will say how busy they are, but they don't know how to manage the time. And where I'm going at with that is, Tim Ferriss is 80-20. Or if you're a coach or if you're an assistant, an assistant, you really can't cut out 20% of the people if you're at a club because you got to cater to everybody. But if you're a coach, and particularly independent coaching, and you have 20% of your people eating up 80% of your time, that's not very efficient. And that means you're not paying attention to the ones who could be growing your business. They're going to tell friends and colleagues, and you're going to grow more, as opposed to, let's just face it, some people are extremely needy unnecessarily for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And we don't get into the psychological aspect of it. Someone just wants attention nonstop, and they micromanage, and they don't do themselves any good, and they're definitely not doing the coach any good. So it's like, maybe at some point, in order to make your life more efficient, you're doing it from the business perspective of, here's a tool you can use to become extremely efficient, maintain contact with the ghost lessons, develop, grow, etc. But at some point, the coaches have to look at their own business coaching. How do they expand it? And then what do they need to do that? And an inconvenient truth might be that they have to tell some people, look, either we have to change to this and I can dedicate X amount of time to you, but I cannot continue to dedicate. We can't have your hour lesson running hour and 15 minutes because I get backed up for the rest of the day. It's not fair to the other 8 people behind.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a decent human being, I think that they would understand it. If they're not, well, you're better off maybe without them. And, you lose one and you pick up 3. That's
Right.
a pretty good trade-off.
Yeah. That's the authenticity, candor, right? The kind of things that we've discussed. Total side note, if you're a golfer interested in this app, Alex at V1 Sports, just email me. And same on the pro side, if you find this an interesting conversation, because we want to learn more. Again, our learning never stops. There's always more use cases. That's kind of been the theme of the whole thing.
Yeah, and I will have all that one-click link to all those, to your website,
Oh
your
yeah, okay,
social
great.
media, and
Yeah.
your email, everything.
But yeah, we're very careful not to be as candid maybe as as you were, because we like all pros. But that's the platform. Whether they make the choice to make a move like that, if you will, Pete, not my business, if you will, at V1. But we do want to provide the tools and are working on the tools to show you, here's this golfer. This is what you've done with this golfer, right? You are not doing online lessons with that person. You are not chatting with that person. You've lost touch with this person.
Mhm.
But that's, again, and it's a choose your own adventure. At that point, that's a jumping off point for your opinions, etc. But you have to first have visibility and understand what's really happening, right? As a starting point to know that it's this one person that's sucked up, right? 10% of your day
Yep.
and only pays half the time, or whatever the issue is. And yeah, if you're not getting those tools, and again, that's really, just to belabor the point, our focus, right, is to understand those pain points.
Companies like you that have made the dedication to, let's improve this for our market, who we're looking to help. That is the core value, or one of the strong core values. And golf coaches across the board, whether you agree with their theories or not, their core values is they want to help people. That's what draws them to.
Yeah.
They get a great amount of satisfaction off watching somebody either get the ball airborne for the first time or shoot 61 in the final round of whatever collegiate high school tournament they're in. That's where the coaches get their satisfaction. And they will, to their own detriment, will spend an enormous amount of time with somebody, even if it is going to hurt the rest, because they think they're doing the right thing, when in actuality it could be hurting them, the student, and all the people that are also in line to come to them for help. So I'm not knocking them. Again, I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
If you're a young coach out there, I'm not giving you a hard time. I'm just telling you, here's what you can do. That is maybe a difficult thing to do in the time, but use my failures to not have to go down those paths.
Well, that's kind of, that's an interesting point as it pertains to some of our earlier conversations, because you could be able to use the phrase, if you're not willing to fire clients, basically what are you doing, right? And again, it's a little bit like the intolerance for core value. It's got a negative connotation. But that's the same. That's a leadership thing. It's the same that we're trying to manage, right? We're trying to push forward. You talked about the code bases, but in a lot of ways, any friction, for us was a retreat historically, I think, right? And so we kind of moved in a bunch of different directions to please a bunch of different people, and therefore didn't much of a direct, right? Didn't move forward. So we use the word positive friction, or phrase positive friction, meaning if there's friction, because we are changing some things, we want there to be a positive or a constructive conversation that comes from it, meaning there is a solution to that friction. However, might not be a sufficient solution. Someone might just want things to stay the same. Well, that's a different story. That ship has sailed, unfortunately, right? Some of the, like, data privacy issues, it manifests itself in some of our technology, requiring people to sign in to see videos and stuff. And we have some of our B2B instructors who understand, say, hey, it didn't used to be this way. I don't like this. This is friction for my student. Yeah, well, there's all sorts of data privacy rules that exist today that didn't exist 15 years ago that we have to respect to be a responsible company. Otherwise, we don't abide. We get slapped on the wrist. That might be a TKO, right? For us, that might be, or a KO. That might be the end of it. You don't have any software, right? So we have to balance those things. But we're very focused on, if we're going to introduce friction, there is a solution, or there's a solved path. It might not be, to channel kind of your sentiment, a solved path that works for everyone. But we're certainly not in the business of creating a problem and saying, "Oh, we just created that problem, no problem." Right? Like, not our, well, we have to deal with privacy. There's no solution, or there's no middle way, or there was no thinking about how to do this in the least painful way. We're just going to do it, deal with it. Certainly not what we're trying to achieve. I think sometimes people will perceive it that way, right? And that just is what it is. But we are anytime we approach these problems, I like to make a gradient of the extremes and then work towards the middle, right? And an extreme always is, too bad, so sad, right? Or, okay, we'll do exactly what you say. I mean, it's going
to be somewhere between those two.
It's got to be somewhere between the two in any of these, kind of think pieces, or as we evolve as a company. But yeah.
I've got to ask you about a very cool thing that you guys have, and that's the Black Cat Ventures, which is if I'm not mistaken, Michael Jordan's investment.
Yep.
Part of his investment portfolio is involved in V1, which has got to be a very, very cool. Well, from the outside looking in, I'm speculating that could be a very cool thing that you're associated with Michael Jordan, and it seems everything that seems like he gets involved with does extremely well. And for him, and or the people that he associates himself with and manage the things for him, are looking at you guys and saying this is something that we believe in, or else we wouldn't give an influx of capital to it. I want to touch base on that and kind of even go how that introduction was made, and then how is it very cool or to be associated with someone like MJ, or can it be difficult at times because his expectations are so high? Is arguably when he's the GOAT in basketball and one of the greatest athletes ever. So his expectation and his level the bar is so high. Okay, so I mean, that's a couple questions in one. I'm only supposed to ask one at a time. I did learn that about doing discussions, but how did that meeting come about? Or introduction?
I mean, it's been a catalyst, right, for all the things that we've discussed. And it did, I don't know what the right phrase is, awaken V1, right, or the expectations change. What's funny, again, is not someone who came up, if you will, in the golf industry. I've never had a conversation where someone, refused to take the call from V1 or just had no stinking clue within golf, right? What V1 was, right? So a lot of those relationships I would say were latent or were there, right? And so when the conversations began, as told to me, again, that clicked immediately, right? To your point, I'll speak back to the obstacles the way, and there is no expectations are good, not bad, in my opinion. Prior to that investment, I think there weren't a lot of expectations from the longtime shareholders, etc., because the company just kind of was what it was. And this awakened them. It's a little bit like being in a movie where you might awaken some skeletons or some ghosts. You don't know what's going to happen next, and so because people had been dormant, if you will, and then all of a sudden, like, well, there might be something here, right? After all, so again, none of the people that are here, myself included, would be here without that catalyst. So there's something to be said for. And I've not had direct interactions with MJ, but with his team, there's something to be said for that presence. To your point, I think you're speculating accurately that. There are expectations, and the standard is high. Actually, you might. I remember Bobby Ross, the old Army coach, and he was Lions coach. He had a year or two of success, and then somewhere in there, things started to, fall apart. He had some press conference where he just kept saying the bar is high. It was a little bit like, the playoffs or any of the or practice. Any of these sports. If you a big sports fan, all those references. Allen Iverson, etc. Jim Mora. But yeah, I mean, the bar was raised, right? And it continues to be raised in a good way, not a bad way. In a good way because, what are you getting up out of bed in the morning for, right? It's hopefully to achieve something or to challenge yourself and to grow. So, that catalyst was definitely injected into the culture and into the organization, and it's spurred, I guess subsequently a lot of growth, right? Maybe not in a straight line. I always like to say, the fastest point between two objects is not a bulldozer between A and B, right? Sometimes it requires some zigzag and some learning or
some wiggly lines,
right? So
go in different directions,
right? I wish it was that simple, right? A to B, done, simple, very clear. It was a huge catalyst for the company for sure, and we're better for it without that.
What as you look forward with the bombardment? I shouldn't say bombardment. I should say the advancement and continually evolving technology. Being in the tech sector, how do you manage not what to use versus what not to use? In other words, not jumping at everything that comes across your path, and how do you say no to some things?
Yeah, I mean that's really to me that's the secret, Pete. And I'm not saying I have the secret and we are successful, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying that is the secret to success that we strive for is maintaining the right level of focus on what our North Stars are and our goals, and without being distracted by the shiny objects, but being aware of them. So I'll use the example of AI. I think we talked about it briefly in terms of these transcriptions,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Um, I think it was, I know this, but it was November 30th. It was 22 or 23 is when OpenAI really made a big deal about ChatGPT and made it available to the public. Only because it's my birthday. So if you want to email me birthday presents in another, 7-8 months, everyone, Alex, if you want support. I only remember the date for that reason. But I kind of ignore. I mean, I was aware of it, but I ignored it too early, right? That someone else can go waste their time, right? But you fiddle with it. And I had
Mm-hmm.
colleagues in various realms, right? Oh, what about this? What about that? Did you see this thing? Yeah, I'm not quite ready yet. But the more you were exposed to it, so for us, we've used AI just as one example, right? Pete? As something that we don't want to be the first mover. We want to be the first victim, I like to call them. But second or third, we're interested, right? Let's see how it shakes out a little bit. But then we always ask ourselves within the framework of the core values and what our kind of North Star are in terms of recurring revenue metrics, et cetera. How is this going to expedite that or make the case as to why before we set down the path? It's clearly a very powerful tool. And we have, again, for internal use and productivity, if you will, we've started to deploy it. And then I think, again, there's been a lot of conversation in golf, right? The AI tools and swing fault detection. I think it's great. Is it competitive with a pros business? I'll let other people kind of weigh in there. That's not really our focus. We haven't found the economic way to monetize it yet. And I don't think anyone else has either in a profitable way. So we're watching very carefully. We've had dozens of conversations. This implementation, that computing the data is still very costly. And so we don't want to be left out, but we also don't act on FOMO. I think that's like a teenage thing, not a grown-up thing.
Well,
My opinion,
FOMO
right?
is becoming a more popular term for fear of missing
Fear of
out.
missing
For
out.
some of you might
Right.
not be aware.
So we're not going to do anything just for that reason, right? Well, everyone else is doing it. We just got to do it. But I'll give you an example that fits into our strategy. Is this difference between customization and personalization, right? So I explained to you a little workflow where we can customize an experience for your students to alleviate some of your marketing burden, right? So you have ghost, again, I use the ghosting, right, the phrase, but you have ghost customers that come once. We can set up some rules for you, Pete, and that's in the V1 Coach app here live shortly. To follow up with those people via chat and other ways in a programmatic way, right? Hey, I haven't seen you in 6 months. Come back. Here's a discount offer. Here's what's new at the club, whatever, right? And by the way, I think that pushes the envelope for what is happening in the space for these B2B tools for instructors as a starting point. But using AI and we build back to the concept of software as a service. We build the service first in a manual way, use it, see if it works, and then we build the software around it from a discipline perspective. And so same thing here, but we built a manual process to use some of these AI tools to create those follow-ups on a personalized way. And we continue to add more data to those data sets. So I've shown some clients examples of here's a video lesson you sent to a person, and let's assume that they don't follow up with you over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks. Based on that video lesson, here's follow-ups we can send via chat in the app or via email if you choose. But by the way, in-app notifications are open at a 20% rate and email at 2%. So
Wow.
these in-app notifications
It seems to be more personalized if it's in the app.
Right. More personalized, A, but then B, the messaging is actually personalized. And this leverages your time. So it says, this is the fault that we worked on. We committed to following up in a nice way. We haven't followed up, right? Here's when I'm available, etc. Right? Again, the AI is doing these things for you. You're still in control. That's an example of how we're looking at the AI tools to fit into this theme of being a business solution for the pros. Not how we're looking at it, I think, maybe to your point, being a rebel or, zigging when others are zagging, from the perspective of, let me show you a really cool thing that does cool stuff. And the utility is, well, it's cool. I like fun things. I like cool things too. Like, don't get me wrong. But when we're running this business, we're really, again, from the strategy perspective and the core value perspective, what are these new tools and technologies and how can we deploy them with what we define as our ideal customers, which is a student that wants to improve. Yes, absolutely, as we talked about, but also the pro who wants to improve their business and really grow their business. That's our ideal customer. So really focus on deploying the new technologies as they come available within that lane, because that's where we think is our happy spot, if you will, or that's where we have product market fit would be, what a wonky person would say, right?
How much, because your space got invaded through the growth of the technological sector, and I think that somewhat took away some market share as there was more competition in that space. As far as uh, sport, let's say sports, but golf in particular, utilization of critiquing and the ability to look at somebody's swing, overlay it with the pros, draw circles, lines, art, everything on there, everything that you do. That industry really got. There were a lot of apps that came out as far as competitors, and then you obviously, I've said before, you guys have made a complete turnaround. But when you have so much competition like that, do you stay focused on what you have determined are the goals for the company, or do you pay attention a little bit to what some of the competitors are doing? How do you manage that highway?
Yeah, I mean, this is, if you're familiar, and I got the book on the shelf over here. We talk about, reading, the blue ocean and red ocean strategy, right? So meaning a bloody ocean or like kind of clear waters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, I think what we do well is accept reality for what it is. So commoditize is a word that we use a lot. Those things that you describe, those features and tools, they're commoditized. A lot of people do it. There's features, and you'll see critiques, or I'll hear critiques, and I thank the people that give them. Well, it's the same as everyone else, right? Or I can get those
Mm-hmm.
lines everywhere, etc. Yes, if you want to pick apart each individual thing, but it's about the sum of the parts more than each individual thing. Sure, we get that one little thing here and this one little thing there. So go to YouTube on this thing and go right. Yeah, sure, we can pick it apart and find each of the individual parts. Yeah, I mean, you got to be aware, right, of what's happening in the space. But this concept, you don't want to be the broken record, right? Being a business solution provider, tying our success to your success as an instructor, and trying to make your the ability to run your business, whether you're an independent contractor at a private course or a public course, or you're an employee, right? That teaching business as a revenue stream, optimizing that. That's where we want to live. And again, when I go to the PGA show, I do look at these things a little bit differently. Again, not being, the golf guy, and the jury's still out whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I tell you, there's differing opinions for sure. But I see a lot of focus on, which is not a bad thing, right? Again, I just have to use cars, on selling Lamborghinis and Maseratis, and a lot less focus on selling, F-150s are actually pretty popular and profitable for Ford, right? But the Focuses, right? Or
Ford Focus, yeah.
right? Your mid-sized, vehicle, your Jeep Cherokees, which I drive. That's not sexy. Like, it's a job done for a lot of people. We talk about how many golfers are and how many pros. So that's the way it's taken a long time for us to sift through and say, boy, you look at, I don't want to give them, the credit, so I won't mention any names. You look at company XYZ, and man, they must have spent $500,000 on that booth at the PGA show. And that means they're spending this much more on their, features than we are, and so on and so forth. But again, to this theme of putting yourself in other people's shoes, we ask ourselves, okay, so that's a threat, right? It's a big money cannon that's being spent on really cool stuff that's just cooler than our stuff. Let's be candid, right? That's cool. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the same, whiz bang effect. If you look at my thing, like, does that bother me? And, sometimes it does. Don't get me wrong. But then we think about our strategy and we say, well, is it a threat to the core of what we're trying to achieve in the strategy? I mean, there was a big acquisition in the space recently. Reading the press release, you go, that's a little concerning, right? But again, we think maybe because we're boring, but we think focusing on this meat and potatoes part, doing support well, tying our success to your success, and when your business grows, hopefully our business grows, get more golfers in the consumer app, etc. We like those aligned interests. We're not trying to charge you, the pro, generally speaking, more for more. That's we kind of lifted ourselves out of that red ocean. We think we're trying to move ourselves over into this blue ocean. So you have to be aware of what the competition is doing. It doesn't mean that we spend a lot of time comparing. We spend a lot of time trying to understand what's going on, and if it refutes or buttresses or supports our kind of view of the overall market. Funniest part is we're all private companies. No one knows what's happening. We can't see publicly, financials, etc. It's clear there's a lot of people, a lot of investment in the space, etc. That's unprofitable. And we're running this business to be a profitable business. So that's a handicap in some ways. We talked about resources, etc. But it's a responsible way to run a business too.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, people don't seem to buy features. If they do, that they're not going to be very loyal people. The ones who focus only on features don't. The ones who focus on solving a problem and making things easier for the consumer is the one. I mean, Amazon is the prime example of that. I mean, you get on Amazon and how sexy is their website? It's not the sexiest website. It's extremely functional, but the process of buying and even especially returning something if you thought you need it and you don't, or whatever the case is, the return process in a world that people where time is such a valuable resource is probably the top three things nowadays as far as what people value is their time because they're pulled in so many directions. But solving problems for people and making it as efficient as possible seem to be extremely high on anybody's list of things that they're looking for, and not so much, well, we can do this and our competitor can't, or if a new company comes out with an app and says, well, we can do this and V1 can't. Yeah, but that's not what the consumer wants. It's great to have. It's nice, but it's not really what they told us that they need.
Right. Yeah. Look, features are important. Don't get me wrong. Right. But
correct.
In a product management perspective, most people believe that your feature or your product needs to be 7 times better than an incumbent to get someone to change. Right. Because people are loyal and there's a trust factor. So maybe it's a hand that we've been dealt, etc. But we're again tripling down on those aspects: the loyalty, the trust, and listening, and hoping to retain certainly the people that we have. Again, 30-ish% market share, a couple thousand accounts on that pro side, and each of those accounts has instructors. Many instructors associated with each one. That's kind of where we are and what we're trying to achieve. And again, it's not that we're not trying to do the cool stuff too, right? But it is about a listening thing, and we've not heard. They were listening to the wrong people, and this is anecdotal, not data-driven, right? But we've not heard, I really need this, 3D skeleton thing right now because it's going to make my business explode. I don't want to pick on anyone, right? So you pick one out of thin air, or I really need a top tracer trace in my swing video analysis tool to show my golfer I'm going to get so many more golfers. So I've heard is I don't have the time. The people come to me once, they don't come back. I have the time to follow up with them, right? So on and so forth, right? These business problems that we've been discussing. So we're focused on those. By the way, we talk about this all the time. The I am crazy question could be the wrong bets, Pete. We could be wrong, right? But that's kind of the thrill and the challenge of doing this is, again, not 50-50, half on red, half on black, but placing some bets in a direction. Educated, hopefully, right? Thought through, hopefully, and seeing how it pans out. And we feel like we're on the right track right now, but keeps me up every night wondering if we are or not, right? And how the movie's going to end, if you will. So we'll find out.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in your sector in the near and distant future?
I think for us, I think 2023 for us was a year of challenges, and 2024 is a year of attacking opportunities. It's a thematic thing. We've talked about that a lot. 2024, our biggest challenge is our biggest opportunity too. It's navigating this migration, Pete, from some of the old software to the new. And I'll say selling, not because of the dollars that result, but selling the concept of this platform, right? And that the idea that it will save you time and it's going to bring your golfer closer and increase your, I'll say intimacy, but that's a funny word, right? With your students. That's the biggest challenge because we thought we heard enough. We thought we saw enough data to say that's where we're going to place our bets. And from that focus perspective, and given the history of this company, and you said, the brand, Harley Davidson, etc. We feel good about that. We feel proud about our efforts, if you will, and how we take care of our people and our customers on both sides of the fence. We're going to double, triple, quadruple down on that. And the challenge is going to be to bring through some of those people who've been saying two things to us by their behavior, saying, I'm very happy where I am. Thank you. 90% retention. On the other hand, saying, gee whiz, I wish, you could make this better or that better. And I haven't seen the changes, right? So threading that needle, serving, understanding the behavior and listening to the verbal, if you were, the anecdotal, and trying to land that plane is going to be that's the biggest challenge. But it's also an
I would have to
opportunity.
imagine. Yeah, I'd have to imagine that as a company that's in the tech sector, that there has to be the tech development as far as the back end and what you guys are able to go after you talk to some coach and they say, we'd like to see X, Y, and Z. Well, okay, we can do X, Y, but Z as an industry, the technology hasn't advanced to that level yet that we can comfortably and confidently get that to you where we think it's going to work and help you. We're working on it, and as soon as industry as a whole comes around and we're able to provide that where we know it will work the way that you want it to, then we're happy to do so.
Sure. Yeah.
So how much do you have to rely on the industry as a whole to provide the back end things for you to provide to the customer?
That's a great question. We placed a bet on the Flutter platform, which is a Google. It's not a language, programming language, but it's kind of one way to understand it. And it was pretty immature when we placed a bet 2 years ago, but there's been a lot of time and effort in building it. So every technology is a wave, as we kind of discussed. And you want to catch it at the right time when it's evolving and growing, and not, ride the wave too long to the point where it's not being supported, et cetera. So yeah, from data privacy, you're talking about a company that's 25, 30 years old, that all sorts of new rules and regulations and best practices, right? And so there's a legacy here. When you think about what's the highest and best business model over time, right? You want to talk about 90s, Ford, sell big, expensive stuff. Late 90s, early 2000s, Microsoft, sell one time software, right? They have internet phase, just pick a thing and say .com and it's going to be successful, right? Say that tongue in cheek. But now we moved to SaaS, and now we've moved to just a subscription model. I'd argue that it's different, but we don't have to really go there. The point being, the business models change too. The market values in a business changes. So the technology is changing behind all that to power those things, right? There are certain things that our technology, especially on the Windows software, doesn't allow us to do. It's kind of hard to imagine it will ever allow us to do in terms of two-factor authentication. So you have to manage those things. Anytime I use the word manage, it doesn't mean optimize. Those are different things. And it's a little bit like,
exactly.
This is what it is. We got to manage it. So yes, you have to. And I'm not also the technical, founder, right? So it's been a learning curve for me to speak engineer, if you will, and understand what's possible and what's not. And what's possible to deliver, I'll say profitably, right, or sustainably. We can do anything, theoretically, right? But if Pete is the only guy who wants a pink unicorn to fly across the screen, when a shot is good, I could tell you, oh yeah, Pete, we're really working hard on that. It's going to be great, right? And we'll give it to you soon. We can't be all things to all people, right? I think the biggest thing I've learned in this journey is that people do, hitting on the same thing of authenticity, respect if you're being honest. We're just not going to do that. Unfortunately, your feedback is, a distinct minority, or I've really not heard that much from other people. And I don't want to build a feature. I have a good friend, colleague in a networking group who's the CEO of a SaaS company based in Canada, software as a service company, Dan. And Dan says, anytime I have a customer conversation and they ask for a new feature, I say, will you pay me for it? And they always say yes. And I say, will you give me all of the money, the cash in your wallet right now for the feature? Because I don't know how much cash they're carrying, whatever, but they always say no. And I go, okay, well, if you're not going to give me, I don't know how much cash you carry. I don't, $20, 40, but whatever. But the point is, are you really willing to pay for it, right? It's very easy to ask for the flying car, so on and so forth. And so it's definitely a challenge, sorry, to your question, to navigate what's possible, how hard, how easy, what input are you getting from the customers? Because at the end of the day, as much as we're listening to them, the answer isn't yes to everyone, right? There's a menu at the restaurant.
You can't.
The restaurant, most restaurants are not, build your, choose your own adventure, right? Here's the menu. Here's what we offer. You want some other things? We can think about those things, small modifications, right? But you can't ask for, the prime rib if we don't offer prime rib. I can't go, find the cow and, there's a process here to get to the point where I can deliver prime rib to you, right?
Don't go to a vegetarian restaurant and ask for prime rib.
Sure. So yeah, that's a challenge. Again, it comes with, I think, some of the confidence in placing those bets, and saying this is who we are and this is what we do and this is what we don't do. Um, and you might not love that, especially in a scenario where we are, where there's been a company that's been operating for a couple decades, and there's kind of an expectation being set. So you asked about the biggest challenge. That's going to be the challenge. It is a challenge. We're all very aware of it. I want to do it in balance these competing interests, if you will, in the best way that we can. Um, and be respectful of the relationships that we do have, because we wouldn't be here without those historically. So that's really the challenge conundrum of V1, but it's a fun one. We enjoy working on it.
For the individual out there, whether it's a young kid, high school, college age, or just out of school, or an entrepreneur, what would be your best advice to them? That they look at you and they say, I'd love to be in his position one day.
I would say, are you sure? That would be my first question, Pete.
That's what most people say.
It's kind of a good, maybe summary point, right? Or capstone question. It's so funny. The shoe's on the other foot. I've had a lot of great mentors. Not that I still don't have great mentors today. But as I reflect, and I do some mentorship for kids at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, because I went to Michigan, go blue. Just funny, I hear some things other people have said to me, like, man, how old are you? And what's happening? What have you done with your life? But I think a theme, they go, well, how did you end up, right? Like this and that and that. And when you tell a story, it sounds like there's a logical conclusion. First of all, no one knows how they got where they got, right? Like, no, they might have had vague intentions, but Steve Jobs didn't grow up saying, I'm going to be Steve Jobs. I mean, maybe he did, but very, very few people, right? I mean, that is just not the way it works. It's not a storybook, right? But you can have some vague, right, kind of direction goals. I mean, I went to, my first career was in live TV. And I got bored. I went to law school. I don't know why that was a solution. But when I went,
that's hell of a pivot.
Yeah. But when I went to law school, I didn't really want to be a lawyer. And then, in fact, one of my great mentors, the dean of the University of Tennessee Law School, I finished at Notre Dame, but I started at Tennessee. Dean Blaze, great name. Said, Alex, no one's ever shown up to my law school and said they don't want to be a lawyer on the first day. Why do you want to be a lawyer? And he said, I don't. I was like, what the heck is this guy doing here? He said, in retrospect, I probably sounded like a jerk, but didn't have the self-awareness maybe at the time. But I didn't. I wanted to see more of what I wanted to see. And that's why I chose to be a corporate lawyer. I wanted to see a bunch of movies, get a bunch of reps as a backup quarterback, if you will, just to see more and build kind of a data set and live a bunch of different lives in rapid succession, if you will, through the eyes of my clients. Why are they doing this deal? What's working about it? What's not? Why did it fall apart? Why was it successful? Was it successful 6 months later, right? I might just try to put myself in a place of serial learning, if you will. I think that would be my piece of advice. If you're curious, again, I think it's really hard to work towards an outcome, because you're going to change your mind about what you want the outcome to be. If you're like me, I change my mind every 5 minutes. But putting yourself in a position to learn, I think, is maybe a theme of what I've tried to do. The first career thing was opportunistic. It was Big Ten Network. It was the first days. Someone came to me and said, we need to do these these games. There's 6 of them. I said, why don't we do them all? Like, we could do them all. We did 36 the first year. We didn't know what we were doing, but we figured it out. We would put ourselves in a position to learn. That's kind of how I viewed the lawyer experience. I didn't want to be a litigator because I knew I didn't want that path. It wasn't interesting to me. I wasn't going to learn as much, I didn't think. So that would be the theme. I'm still learning. I'll never stop. And I can't wait to see, not that I'm trying to, I'm leaving V1 tomorrow, but what comes after V1, right? Because I am living a life of serial experiences, if you will, on the corporate or career side, rather. So yeah, I think that'd be my piece of advice. And also maybe, secondarily, if you're learning wherever you are, it's worth it. And as soon as you feel like you're not learning, or you don't want to learn anymore, like you've learned enough, then move on. I didn't love my experience as a corporate attorney, certainly at my first firm. I think I'd have a better attitude about it today. Different issue. with a couple more, years under my belt. But I stayed for the time I did because I was learning, and I got advice along the way where I was like, I just don't like this. I want to leave. But are you learning? Yeah. All right. Maybe stick it out. But as soon as you're not, it's not a good spot. That's just the
Yeah,
most. Yeah.
learning. I would growing and learning. I think would be hand in hand
Yeah.
in those situations.
Yeah. So as long as you're learning,
as far as
I think you're in the right spot, or growing, you're in the right spot. And as soon as you don't think you are, sidebar, you spun me up again, right? I had a lot of friends in that same life phase. It's like, well, I just changed jobs 2 years ago, right? It's going to look like I'm flighty or whatever. Yeah, sure, there's some of that. But the person who makes a snap judgment based on seeing the resume and seeing, 3 job changes in 6 years, do you want to work for that person? Because that's kind of lazy. If you have a story, if you have a why, I wasn't growing here. I went up to this point and I looked at my boss and said, man, I don't want to do that job. I'm not learning. I want to change industries, whatever. To me, that's a good story, not a bad story. Yeah, don't change jobs every 6 months because you get bored in 2 seconds. And don't get me wrong, right? But if you really,
because you're not making a difference,
right?
Yeah, the young kids. Well, I'm not making a difference. Well, you're 22 years old and you've been here 6 months,
right? So yeah, that would be my maybe a macro piece of advice. And I had a closing thought. There's a person I won't name him because he'll be embarrassed, but. We have a board member who's in his 70s. Who's
don't embarrass a board member.
Or this employee, but who's very engaged, and who knows why. He's had a very successful career. This employee, if you once said, I think like this board member, you're a sicko. Oh, a sicko. What does that mean? Is that good or bad? He goes, no, I think it's a compliment. Like you don't stop. Like your brain, like you're working on these problems when you're brushing your teeth, whatever. And so that's why I say, yeah, tongue in cheek. First, ask you why you want to do what I'm doing. But there is a little bit of a disease to it. I mean, you're kind of a sicko, right? And Pete, you're the same way, right? In improving your brand and improving what you're doing. But yeah, you have to, if you want that entrepreneurial path, there's risk associated, and you have to be a little bit weird. I mean, most people are not entrepreneurial. And we have this kind of, your Twitter speak or whatever, like, oh, entrepreneurs are great. They're great. Like a lot of things, there's a lot of negatives of it, having a steady paycheck.
There's 2 sides to each coin.
Right. Being predictable and whatever, that can serve a lot of, for your kids or your wife or whatever your social situation is. There's some positives of those things. There's reasons that people choose that path that are good reasons, by the way. So as always, maybe step 1 is, are you sure? In whatever direction you want to go. And if so, then yeah, just ask yourself if you're learning. And if you are, you're making progress, right? If you're not,
yes,
then maybe time for a change.
It's maybe time to pivot. I forget who it was. I don't know, it was Elon or somebody, very, very successful, said that the old model, if you go back to, our parents' age, in 70s, 80s, not even 90s, in their working career, it was to stay at one company, maybe you switch one. So you're 10, 15 years at each company. But they were saying in the modern era, pivoting 5, 6 times, even so, not just changing companies, but changing a complete career is going to be the way, or it is the way now, and it is going to continue to be that way going forward. As people take their skills in one and they adapt it to another. If we use the old job, and it's hard to think it's an old example now, but the Jobs example, where he started Apple, then he leaves, he starts, I can't remember the name of the other computer company.
Right. Yep. I forget.
Goes on to be, he basically was head of Pixar, helped them get to where they were. Then he did the deal with Pixar and Disney, and then went back to Apple. I mean, here's a guy who's arguably one of the most successful in the world. Take Elon Musk as well. He was in the banking. He did the maps, then he did the banking, then he did the PayPal, then he did the Tesla, then he did the rockets. It's like, okay, you don't have to stay in one career for 30, 40 years anymore.
Yeah.
You can use those skill sets that you developed, as you said. So as long as you're learning and growing, when that stops, okay, maybe it's time to utilize what you learned in another industry that you find interesting, that gets you out of bed in the morning, that you jump out. You don't just, oh shit, I got to go to this again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
We've covered a ton. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it all. You need my social and my address, and then you'll be set.
You got time for emergency 9? We do at the end of each show.
Sure.
Just kind of 9 fun questions. Just at random. The first and the last one I tell everybody are always the same. They've been the same for every episode we've had. and the ones in between are just kind of mix and match, but they're all kind of fun. So if you were playing in the Ryder Cup, or I think it's a President's Cup this year. If you're playing the President's Cup and you get you're walking the first hole and you're gonna have them crank some music to get the crowd all fired up. What song are you gonna have them blasting over the PA system?
LaGrange, ZZ Top, easy. Next question. Yeah, big ZZ Top guy.
All right. Hollywood has been watching your career. They come to you and say, Alex, we're going to make a movie about your life, and we're going to let you or your wife pick whoever you want to play you as a character. What actor are you putting in that place?
Man, that's funny. It's the wife part. That's a little trippy, so I'm not going to go there. But yeah, that's just weird. I have an aunt. I don't think I look like him at all. That believes I look like Matt Damon, which I don't get at all. But so I have to choose Matt Damon just to make my aunt Rita happy.
He's probably the number one answer in that in that question I've had. Yeah, very, very interesting. This one I was curious to hear your answer. Is somebody who, as we just discussed, you grow as much as you can in a position, then you change. But if someone were to give you $25,000 and a couple of first class tickets anywhere you wanted to go in the world, where are you going to go?
Oh man, that's a good question. I got to choose some place I haven't been, I suppose. That's a really good question. Well, I think an easy answer for me would be London. I've not been. I just finished The Last Lion, the first of the 3 Winston Churchill biographies, which you may be familiar with. So I mean that kind of scratches an itch. But the personal answer is India. I've not been. I'm half Indian. Trying to carve out that time for sure in my life. It's important to me. My grandparents were the first generation here, or the immigrant generation. My dad was first generation American. So that's a no-brainer. It's it's India. And seeing the family that I still have there, just understanding kind of where I came from, or half my family came from.
Yeah, I think that's important to a lot of people.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people would like to see where their origins started, the culture and how things were different, and visit people they've never met that they're related to.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. This one might be a bit odd. I thought, hell, I'll just throw it in there. Something you're secretly good at that nobody might know about.
Oh boy. Well, I guess if you just run into me on a daily basis, you don't know that I'm a really committed runner. I really am, and so is my wife. And so if we're just walking around, you just think we're, I don't know, regular people. But it is a irregular thing. Someone used that. Maybe that's a cop out. People that know me. That's a huge, part of who I am. But it has been for forever, basically. Same with my wife. And if we don't get out every day to run, it's kind of like something wrong, or pretty much every day.
It throws off your system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll use that one because, again, if you meet me in a professional context, it's certainly not going to, come up. Right up.
Well, hey, it might come up now that some of your employees might say, "Gee, Al, I know you're a runner. I've been running for 10 years, and what do you think of these shoes, or what do you think of this? Or how do you do that?" All right, cool. What would be your superpower? If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, like I could choose one?
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say it's something that I try to make my superpower, but fail every time, is maybe not reading minds, but understanding people's true intentions. Not in a way that is devious, if you will. But are you trying to scam me? No. But like, what do people mean when they say X, Y, Z? Right? What do they really mean?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that's lost in that translation, I think.
I would agree.
Just being able to better understand people. That's like a really understated superpower. Being able to understand, exactly what you mean when you say it. That would be, I think, the biggest blessing too. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to fly and do all sorts of other fun stuff like that. But that's maybe that's a window into my soul, practicality. It'd be very practical and useful, but I would enjoy it too.
All right. Now, a simpler question: you shower in the morning or the evening?
Morning after a workout. Yeah, morning. Yeah.
Okay.
Boy, I couldn't imagine doing it another way.
A couple more, and then the pain's over. The last book you read, or what book is on your nightstand?
Yeah. So Last Lion, I just finished, but I'm actually, I don't read it a ton, but I really should read more fiction. And so I'm on the 5th of 6 Dune books, right, from the 70s or 80s, science fiction.
Yeah, they're coming out. They're remaking that movie.
Right. Yeah. The Dune
I
2 just
saw.
came out. That's kind of originally, I've always been interested, just never got around to reading them. But it's a little bit surprising how applicable fiction can be to like the real world. I mean, you think about those stories and you map it. So yeah, I finished Last Lion and now I'm halfway through the second to last Dune book. So I'm a nerd, what can I say?
All right. Two more. If what of any restaurant or franchise you could put in your kitchen, what one are you going to put in there?
Well, the practical and healthier answer would be Panera because it's definitely frequent flyer on road trips, whatever there. But big Chick-fil-A fan. We have one in town now, but Chick-fil-A is pretty.
They just got one up there?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I thought they would have one a long time ago.
I'm surprised we have one. So it's about expectations, I guess.
Me too. And then the last one, I don't know how much of you watch golf on TV or not, but in your opinion, over the course of history, who would you say is the greatest of all time golfers?
Oh boy, I'm going to redefine the question to be at their peak for the moment in time. I don't think there's any doubt that it was Tiger. You want to do historical and Jack with more majors and so on and so forth. And his prescient quote, right? Let's see if Tiger can do it after he has kids, which there's other things going on besides the children, but that was
a little different.
Yeah, that was a pretty dang spot on comment from Jack, right? But I mean, I think he was Michael Jordan times 10 in his ability just to dominate and intimidate the competition, right? So much of golf is mental, right? That's biased because I was, when Tiger was at his peak, watching a ton of golf and was younger and impressionable, whatever. But I think, I guess you can't know, right? Because I don't have the time machine to go back. That's got to be those singular moments in time on Sunday when he was 2 or 3 strokes back, and you just knew it's just going to happen. I mean, he's going to get these guys.
Knew, they knew, and they all knew that he knew.
Right. Yeah. So that there's maybe a cop-out answer by narrowing defining it. But
no, it's not cop-out. I mean, he's in the lead. I've asked that well over 100 times now, and I would say it's about 60-40, maybe 65-35 Tiger. And it seems to be a little more generational.
Sure.
Anyone 55 plus has heavily gone to Jack. Mm-hmm. Anyone 50 and under is heavily gone towards Tiger. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
So you've got the app. It's all the updates are the new version is going to be out in about a month. You'll publish Sunday, so roughly 4 to 5 weeks after.
Yeah, but in the meantime, please reach out. There are people that are using it in the wild right now. There's kind of a difference between the public unveil and still working out some kinks and let's build the confidence level. So yeah, on either side of the fence, if your listeners are interested, just email me. Simple, alex@v1sports.com. And I can get you access one way or the other. Give you some free time on the golf app, or and some free time on the new V1 Coach as well.
Very cool. I highly recommend it. It is a great product. It has been for a very long time, and even if it had a little dip, it's even greater now. So it took advantage of slow period, improved it, and it's doing very, very good things for golfers across the spectrum.
Well, thanks, Pete. I appreciate that.
All right, just hang out a minute, and hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.